Wa alaikum salam. Wa alaikum salam. Praise belongs to Allah. Dante Stewart. Thank you. Wa alaikum salam. All episodes of opening the files should, if you go to Black Guy Protocol, go to the live section versus the videos, because these were live streams. So all episodes of opening the files should be under the live tag on our YouTube page. Brother Kevin, I appreciate you. Supreme Asiatic, happy Savior's Day. Praise belongs to Allah. Brother Eric, Sister Carla, well, Brother Carl, Brother Michael, Brother Robert, Brother Daniel, Assalamu alaikum, family. We just want praise belongs to Allah. I appreciate you, fam. So you did tune in at the right time. Sister Dawn, assalamu alaikum. CEO Wanu, praise belongs to Allah. I appreciate you. Appreciate your comment. Yes, we are fasting. We just came off of our national fast. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. All right. In the name of Allah, who came in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, to whom all holy praises are forever due, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah. And I bear witness that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad is his living and exalted Christ. I further bear witness that the Honorable Brother Minister Louis Farrakhan is their divine reminder, the apostle of God, the Messiah. In their names, family, I greet you. Assalamu alaikum. Now, thank you, dear family, for tuning in this evening. I want to share a few things I want to talk about. My new publications, and what I want to do is engage you, take questions from you, and I will take as many as I'm able. And so I will start there. I will start before I get into my subject tonight. I want to answer some questions that I see in the chat room. And throughout this broadcast, I hope to answer or attempt to answer many of your questions. And I saw one that I want to address right off the bat. Allah's cadet asked the question. He says, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Wesley. Will you ever address the claims of W.D. Fard? Now, of course, that's very non-specific, but I'm going to make an assumption about what you are referring to. And I've been attending to answer the question that I think you're answering, the specific question that I think you're answering. I've been intending to answer that now, because I get that question all of the time, Brother Dr. Wesley. The recent spat of books on Master Fard Muhammad, the recent images and claims regarding the images of a person who the emerging narrative is identifying as Master Fard Muhammad. Dr. Burroughs' book and other books have dropped, and people have been hitting me up. Brother Dr. Wesley, when are you going to respond to these new claims? And of course, because I addressed the first iteration of this particular claim regarding Master Fard Muhammad and this figure, Wallace Dodd Ford, Allah blessed me to successfully address the original iteration of that claim, and we debunked it successfully. Now, of course, that document that I produced was 20 years ago. And since then, there's been apparently much new material, a whole bunch of new images has popped up, and books written based on these new images. So, of course, many want to know, Brother Dr. Wesley, when are you going to address this new iteration of the Fard is Ford claim? And I will say publicly, as I say to everyone who asks me this question, I absolutely intend to address, Allah willing, all of the new material. I absolutely intend to address this Fard equals Ford 2.0 narrative, or narrative Fard is Ford narrative 2.0. I absolutely intend to address it. People have been, as I understand it, reaching out to me, wanting to get me on many platforms. You don't need to waste your time with that right now. I absolutely will address the new material, but in the proper way. What does that mean, Brother Wesley? In the proper way, the way that I do what I do. I don't do any knee-jerk reaction. No one can bait me into a knee-jerk reaction. My first piece of scholarship that I wrote on Fard equals Ford narrative 1.0, I wrote that after reading all 800 pages of the FBI file on Master Fard Muhammad page by page, word by word, multiple times, at least 3 times. I went through the entire FBI file on Master Fard Muhammad at the time before I put that document together. I do deep dives. I don't do any surface dwelling on a topic. And so, as there are new images, supposedly, there's supposedly new information, new documents. I'm not going to knee-jerk react to this new iteration of the narrative when I do a deep dive on all of the new material. And I will critically, I will do a deep dive on all of the new material. I will assess it, and then I will give my thoughts on it. Now, I am engaged in a number of projects right now that I will see to their conclusion before I turn my committed attention to this very important subject. But I certainly will. But your brother doesn't do knee-jerk reactions until by now, you should know how your brother operates. Before I speak on a matter, I'm going to do a deep dive on that subject. And so I will, Allah willing, take a look at all of the allegedly new material that's out there. I will look at everybody who is currently writing on the subject. I'm going to assess all of their work as I understand it. All of them are assessing me and my work in these new texts, and that's appropriate. When I'm able to turn to that subject and do my deep dive, I will offer my assessment of all of their works as well. So, yes, it is coming, family. I'm going to conclude the projects, the deep dive projects that I have before me right now, and then I will absolutely address the Fard equals Ford narrative 2.0. I hope that answer to that particular question is helpful. And as the night goes on, I hope to answer a number of your questions. I do hope, Ed Aziz, I do hope, I have every intention of breaking down crypto civilization and what that means. So we can get started. Yeah, let me pull up the file. Screen. Almost there. There we go. Okay. Can you explain deeper about the plans for the mother plane being in the vaults of Mecca? Is there any connection between the Hindu god's spacecraft? Good question. I do hope to answer both of those. This evening, the subject is the mother wheel. Now, and in particular, understanding the current so-called age of disclosure. What is disclosure, and what is the disclosure that everyone is talking about? What is its relationship to revelation? That is to say, all we hear these days from the government to ufologists, there's agreement that we are currently in an age of disclosure of UFO secrets that the US government allegedly has been keeping secret for decades. One of the questions we want to look at tonight is the relation between government disclosure and divine revelation. Government disclosure and divine revelation. By divine revelation, I mean the revelation of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad regarding this reality that used to be called UFOs, in which the US government has now retagged as UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Now, in 2024, family, I published this book, Chariots of the Black Gods, the UFO reality and the alien hoax. The UFO reality and the alien hoax. Of course, the title gives it away. UFOs are real, but I argument and document in here that the alien narrative is a hoax. The first edition of Chariots of the Black Gods. Now, of course, Eric Van Daniken famously wrote the book Chariots of the Gods. And you are right to assume that the title of this book extrapolates from Van Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, and I'm specifying these are chariots of the black gods. And this is the UFO reality to which I allude in the subtitle of the book. The UFO reality is that they are not alien spacecraft. The UFO reality is that they are chariots of the black gods. Now, this first edition of the book, published in 2024, it is 500 pages long. The footnote count is 1,077 footnotes. I insist on doing scholarship, not just research. There's a distinct difference, family, between doing research and doing scholarship. Inshallah, and by divine Allah's grace, I have been doing scholarship for 3 decades now. Inshallah. So this edition of Chariots of the Black God was my not first, my most robust offering to the subject of ufology. Now, I can be and indeed should be considered a revisionist ufologist. A revisionist ufologist. What is that, Brother Wesley? And why should your scholarship be classified as revisionist ufology? Ufology, of course, is the study of and the writing on the UFO phenomenon. A revisionist, let me back up. Of course, there's a whole bunch of ufologists out there, scholars of the UFO phenomenon. Dr. Jacques Vallée is the doyen, the dean of ufology, for example. He's a great ufologist. Today, you have Dr. Stephen Greer and others. There's a whole field and a whole class of ufologists. And they have, for the most part, agreed on a narrative, a UFO narrative. They have, in large measure, despite the differences, despite the personal contentiousness that has existed in ufology for quite a while, despite all of that, ufology has converged on an agreed upon narrative, an agreed upon explanation of this UFO phenomenon. And that explanation, that narrative in short, is that UFOs are craft originating from distant star systems, distant planets. They are piloted by aliens, extraterrestrial beings that are biologically, morphologically very distinct from earthly humans. The narrative goes further to suggest that the visitation, Earth's visitation from these aliens in their spacecraft resulted after and as a consequence of World War II, in particular, the explosion of the nuclear bombs, that alien civilizations from other planets took note of the bombs that exploded on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they were alarmed by it, and alien civilizations began visiting Earth, checking out what this human species is up to. That's the popular general narrative of the UFO phenomenon, and that is precisely what I have categorized in my book as the alien hoax. Okay, we'll get to that. That's ufology. A revisionist is one who critically re-examines prevailing historiographies, prevailing historical narratives. A revisionist is one who re-examines and challenges prevailing historical or scholarly narratives. The revisionist bases his or her challenge of prevailing narratives on new or underutilized data. So a revisionist offers a corrective to prevailing narratives. That is what I do in the field of ufology, inshallah. I see the conclusions of ufology to be off base, and I see them to be off base not simply because folks got it wrong. As scholars, we're always going to get something wrong, but the prevailing narrative, UFO narrative, is wrong because it's deliberately deceptive. I have, inshallah, took on several of the staple narratives within the larger narrative of ufology. Many of the most important case histories, I have demonstrated that they are wrong. I've produced several reports. For example, Britain's Roswell, the unacknowledged truth of the Rendlesham Forest UFO event, that very important UFO event that occurred in Britain in December 1980, a very important and a very famous UFO event, but told wrong in most of the narrative. I took up the issue, so I produced a revisionist account of Britain's Roswell, of the Rendlesham Forest UFO event. Another famous UFO event, a staple case. Aerial Revisited, the Aerial case. The aerial UFO event that occurred in 1994 in Arua, Zimbabwe. The popular narrative has us believing gray, pale white grays landed in Africa. I demonstrate that that narrative is fabricated. It's not even wrong, it's fabricated. And that in reality, black men, black gods landed in Rua on UFOs, landed in so-called UFOs, landed in Rua, Zimbabwe. Now, so my first robust offering as a revisionist ufologist was the 2004 publication, Chariots of the Black Gods. This, I now offer an updated, revised edition of Chariots of the Black Gods. Whereas the original edition was a single volume, 500 pages, I had to expand it into 2 volumes now, a total of 900 pages. The material is so vast and the case is so robust and ironclad. Chariots of the Black Gods had to be expanded from 500 pages to now 900 pages. Chariots of the Black Gods, Volume 1, Book 1. The subtitle is Ufology's Best Kept Secret, the Black Pilots. This is 500 pages itself of documentation that ufology, why I have said that ufology, I am putting ufology on trial. I'm putting ufology on trial because ufology has not accidentally got it wrong, but ufology has been guilty of the same level of cover-up that ufology has always charged the U.S. government with. And the U.S. government has been guilty of cover-up. But ufology has been guilty of cover-up as well. The U.S. government has been covering up the reality of UFOs. Ufology has been covering up the reality of the black pilots of the UFOs. So Volume 1, Chariots of the Black Gods, Ufology's Best Kept Secret, the Black Pilots. This book, their family, is available on my website. You can access it, avail yourself to it at www.drwesley.info, drwesley, WESLEY.info. That's book 1. Book 2, Chariots of the Black Gods, subtitle, Battle in the Sky. Battle in the Sky, UFOs and the War of Armageddon. This volume is 411 pages. Together, these two volumes, again, amount to 900 pages of scholarship on the UFO phenomenon, but revisionist scholarship, putting the orthodox UFO narrative on trial. I want to touch on some of what you will encounter in each of these volumes. And again, they are available at the website, drwesley.info. Let me say this. A brother asks, how can a brother like me begin doing research and scholarship that bears witness to the teachings if I have no college background? Any specific tips or strategies? Thank you for all of your work. Thank you, dear brother. And great question. Be clear, a college degree does not at all guarantee any success in doing scholarship. A college degree certainly does not in and of itself incline or make our path easy in terms of witness bearing of the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. A college degree can be helpful if the college program you got the degree in taught methodology, taught procedure. But a college degree doesn't have to mean anything, and in most cases, doesn't mean anything. And certainly when it comes to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the prerequisite, the requirement is to be immersed in the teachings themselves. Immerse yourself in the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And then what happens is everything you read, you will see the connections, because the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad are the science of everything in life. So every science you study, every field of knowledge you engage, you will be able to bear witness or see how the facts of that field bear witness to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. A college degree is not necessary, and in most cases, is not even helpful. CEO, Wanu, you're going to be sure to get the first one tonight. Please do. Now, first understand, let's get this out of the way. Family, if any of us are still under the impression that UFOs are fantasy, that UFOs are conspiracy theory, you are outdated. Your thinking is passe. We live in the age where you can turn on your TV on multiple occasions and see government officials on Capitol Hill, government and Pentagon officials on Capitol Hill, affirming that UFOs are real and they are a threat to your U.S. national security. We live in the day where the Washington Post can announce in the biggest, boldest letters, after decades of mocking flying saucers and UFOs, the Washington Post, it can finally, in 2019, announce and declare, quote, UFOs exist and everyone needs to adjust to that fact. So the world needs to adjust to what the editorial board of the Washington Post already knew. Well, we do know that the editorial board and elite boards around the world have known the reality of UFOs, even while they were publicly mocking believers in UFOs. So we don't need to have any discussion now about whether UFOs exist. And none of you family should be listening tonight with incredulity about that point. I'm not going to spend any time tonight trying to convince anybody that UFOs exist. That point is a matter of history. Now, the craft, the technology that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad first alerted the world to in the 30s and has been educating the world about for 90 years now, when no one else had any clue of this modern phenomenon. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was teaching the world that they exist in what they are. Now, today, the world is catching up. But be clear, in this new age of disclosure, government disclosure, in this new age of emerging government transparency on the issue of UFOs, understand that this government disclosure is partial and it is deceptive. The government today is willing to give us this, dear family. They give us the UFOs. They will give us that anomalous advanced craft exist, and the U.S. government can do nothing with them. After decades of making a public believe that UFOs don't exist, they are weather balloons, they are swamp gas. After decades of the government peddling these fictions to debunk the reality of these craft, now the government is very full-throatedly, if I could use that term, is acknowledging, yes, these craft exist, so the government is willing to give us this, the craft, but only in order to divert our attention away from this. Very important. They will give us the UFO in order to divert our attention away from the black UFO pilots. How do they divert our attention away from the black pilots of the UFO that they are acknowledging are real? They do so by burying the black pilots under the mythical alien species and linking these alien species to the UFOs. So now the government is skillfully leading the public to believe that the UFOs, the UAP now, that they are acknowledging to the world are true, are real. The government is carefully and very slickly making a public link these craft with these fabricated aliens. Now, the narrative has evolved to suggest that there are 4 alien species. And Joe Rogan did a show and affirmed that the U.S. government personnel have now admitted that there are 4 alien species behind the UFO phenomenon. So from decades of the government saying UFOs don't exist, now the government is saying UFOs exist, and behind them are 4 alien species that we know a lot about. We can identify them. The Greys, the Nordics, the reptilians, and the insectoids. These are the 4 orthodox or the four alien species that Orthodox ufology agrees on and government ufology agrees on. So the government and ufology, they both agree that UFOs are real and UFOs are flown by one of these characters: a gray alien, a pale white, blue eyed, blonde haired Nordic alien, a reptilian, or an insectoid. Think about that. After the US government and ufology being in conflict all of these years, now, the, with the snap of a finger, government disclosure and UFO narrative converge and agree that UFOs are real and behind them are these four species. Well, this agreement has the aim of burying the true beings behind the UFO phenomenon. This is what this age of disclosure doesn't want the world to know. Neither the government nor ufology wants the world to recognize the true pilots of the craft. Notice that you don't see any black faces. You see a gray face, a white face, a green face, and an insect. But I demonstrate in 500 pages of book 1 of Chariots of the Black Gods. This is the standard description of the pilots of so-called UFOs. The most credible, believable witness accounts described not insects or reptilians or even grays. They describe the pilots encountered by these craft as human, as air-breathing humans, and in most cases, black Asiatic. I document that in book 1 of Chariots of the Black Gods. This is why ufology has to be revised. This is why ufology has to stand trial. As ufology has put the government on trial, ufology itself has to be put on trial. And we are putting ufology on trial because ufology deliberately buries this truth with this lie. The Greys are a lie. The Nordics are a lie. The reptilians and the insectoids. These are fabricated narratives designed to bury the truth of who's really flying these craft. For more than 70 years, the extraterrestrial hypothesis has functioned as the default explanatory model for unidentified flying objects. The persistence of the ETH, or extraterrestrial hypothesis, has little to do with evidentiary strength. The persistence of the ETH is not because the evidence for it is strong. No. This persistence has more to do with cultural convenience. What does that mean? By 1958, after more than a decade of post-Roswell classified investigation, elements within the United States national security apparatus reached a startling conclusion about the nature of UAP, a conclusion that was far more destabilizing than the extraterrestrial hypothesis later promoted in public discourse. And what's more remarkable, the conclusion that they came to aligned strikingly with the revelations of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. The extraterrestrial hypothesis functions as a conceptual decoy, a narrative that appears explanatory while at the same time diverting attention away from a far more destabilizing truth. I'm reading from the book. That far more destabilizing truth is that UFOs are the technology of what can be called a Black Muslim crypto civilization. The extraterrestrial hypothesis is a conceptual decoy, a narrative that the government publicized in order to divert from a more explosive, a more destabilizing truth. And that destabilizing truth is that UFOs are the technology of what can be called a Black Muslim crypto civilization. What is that, Brother Wesley? Brother Zachary, I have been speaking on President Trump's UFO revelations, and I will touch on that tonight. I intend to, actually. A Black Muslim crypto civilization, Brother Wesley? What is that? Again, I detail this fact in the two new volumes of Chariots of the Black Gods. UFOs are the technology of what can be called a Black Muslim crypto civilization. Crypto, of course, means hidden, concealed, secret. Scholars are increasingly acknowledging today that the so-called crypto-terrestrial hypothesis offers a better explanatory model for the UFO phenomenon than does the extraterrestrial hypothesis. The crypto-terrestrial hypothesis is in the process of replacing the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Now, neither of these are the language of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. All of this is the language of ufology. Because I am putting ufology on trial, I have to speak to ufology. So I engage the language of ufology. What is this crypto-terrestrial hypothesis that is closer to the truth that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad has revealed? This crypto-terrestrial hypothesis proposes the existence of an incredibly ancient technologically advanced human lineage that is indigenous to Earth, but has existed in distinct stealth for ages, possibly concealed in subterranean, underwater, or otherwise inaccessible domains on the planet Earth. Recent attention to UAP capable of operating seamlessly in air and water supports a terrestrial and earthly interpretation of the phenomenon. Extraterrestrial is off planet, terrestrial is on planet, crypto terrestrial is on planet but hidden, concealed, secret. Recent attention to UAP or UFOs capable of operating seamlessly in air and water further supports a terrestrial interpretation of the phenomenon. UFOs are not merely aerial observations of objects entering and exiting oceans, lakes, and geological formations, such as volcanoes, have accumulated across multiple decades. Accounts of unidentified submersible objects, UFOs, describe disc-shaped craft that move underwater with the same apparent ease they display in the air, defying known physical constraints. So this popular mechanics article announced it as, quote, "Are underwater UFOs an imminent threat? The US government sure thinks so, and here's the proof." Reports of underwater or subterranean activity, particularly in regions associated with frequent sightings, point toward habitats or at least bases beneath the Earth's surface. This all suggests that UAP technologies are optimized for multiple Earth environments. Such patterns are difficult to reconcile with interstellar origin, extraterrestrial origin, off-planet origin. These facts don't jive with that theory. These patterns more readily or are more readily intelligible if UFOs originate on or even in some way within Earth itself. The existence of a Black Muslim crypto civilization, ancient, technologically advanced, spiritually ordered, terrestrially embedded, and hidden, poses an ontological crisis far greater than extraterrestrials ever could. I'm going to say that again. This is what I document in book 1. The existence of a Black Muslim crypto civilization, a hidden Black civilization, Black Muslim civilization, and indeed in the text, I document encounters with witnesses who encountered not just black pilots, but the pilots gave every indication that they are Muslim, that this is a Muslim civilization. We document that in book 1. So we said in our saying here, the existence of a black Muslim crypto civilization, ancient, technologically advanced, spiritually ordered, terrestrially embedded, and hidden, this poses an ontological crisis far greater than extraterrestrials ever could. Extraterrestrials are philosophically unsettling, but conceptually manageable. Disclosure of extraterrestrial life would challenge man's place in the vast universe, but it leaves our primacy on Earth unchallenged. It can be confirmed that a signal, that SETI received a signal from outside the Milky Way, from a civilization outside the Milky Way. That would be philosophically unsettling, but that won't do anything to change the various orders on Earth today, and it certainly does not change the human hierarchy that prevails on the planet right now. However, disclosure of a hidden, superior, black Muslim civilization challenges mankind's place on Earth itself. Mankind's disclosure of a black Muslim crypto civilization is socially, theologically, and politically disruptive. As such, a civilization destabilizes foundational assumptions about human origins, racial hierarchy, theological authority, and political sovereignty all at once. The UFO phenomenon, in truth, is not evidence of visitors from elsewhere, but is evidence of neighbors who have always been here. The extraterrestrial hypothesis neutralizes the destabilizing implications of discovering another human civilization on Earth, particularly one that is ancient, technologically superior, and black. UAP are less a problem of astronomy and more a problem of anthropology and ontology. For this reason, a black Muslim crypto civilization has been systematically obscured, suppressed. The extraterrestrial narrative operates as a conceptual buffer, insulating Christian theology from reinterpretation, insulating Western anthropology from revision, and insulating political modernity from destabilization. The black Muslim civilization is the real black Muslim crypto hidden civilization, a hidden civilization of black people who are Muslim, have been embedded on the planet for thousands of years. And before, family, you dismiss that as Black Muslim rhetoric, access the book and the documentation, tear it apart, piece it apart, deconstruct it, and debunk it. I do believe that having first written 500 pages on the subject and now 900 pages on the subject, I do believe that I'm due more than being summarily dismissed. So let me pivot here. I have posted and reposted this segment from Tucker Carlson, who was on the Megyn Kelly show, and he made some comments that I found very penetrating. And they resonated with me because I find them absolutely truthful. I'm going to play the clip. It's 5 minutes. And then I want to discuss some of what Tucker Carlson, conservative commentator, said to Megyn Kelly, conservative commentator, to say the least. Let's listen to Tucker Carlson.
We are the subjects of it.
And that will lead us to UFOs. All right. Now, I know you're into this topic, and I know you know people who know a lot about this topic and who may not be able to provide everything they know in a public setting. So what do we know?
Well, I mean, we know beyond question that there are objects and phenomena, aerial and undersea, that can't be explained by science and that seem to defy the laws, will measurably defy the laws of physics, and that are not experimental aircraft created by DARPA or the DoD or by the Russians or the Chinese. Like, we know that. There have been many testimonies to this effect under oath in the Congress in the last 2 years. So like, that's not even a question. Are they real? Yeah, well, obviously they're real. What are they is the question. And I've been down the rabbit hole on this, and just because of my job, the one upside to having a gig like this, as you well know, is if you're curious about something, you actually have access to people who know or say they know, and you just call them up and be like, hey, come to my house, tell me what you know. I'm working on a story about it. I've never done really a story on this because I came to a hard and fast conclusion on it, which I can't prove, but I sincerely believe it, which is that these are spiritual phenomena. Obviously, they've been here forever. There's a lot of evidence of that in the written record going back thousands of years. They're angels and demons, of course. And that would be obvious and was obvious to everyone else. What's so interesting, one of the reasons that this topic will drive you crazy and why I opted out and do no research and talk to no one about it, I'm out, I know what I think, I don't want to know anymore, is because there is such, and this is a matter of record, a concerted, decades-long disinformation campaign by the US government to obscure what's happening. And if you look at that, and I grew up the son of a federal employee in a world where there was a lot of this stuff, so I do know a lot about this. And one of the ways to discredit the truth is by flooding the zone with lies. So rather than just denying UFOs are not real, well, you can't deny that anymore, they are real. What you do is you create a bunch of fake stories leading people in the wrong direction. You flood the zone. There's so many conspiracy theories that no one believes anything. But the way to know what the truth is by figuring out what they're trying to prevent you from believing. And if you look at the US government propaganda, DoD propaganda, on the question of UFOs, UAPs, the one thread that connects all of it is that these are not supernatural. These are little green men from Mars. They're weather phenomenon. They're experimental aircraft. The one thing that they don't want you to believe is that they are spiritual entities.
Why would that be so threatening to them?
Well, that's a great question. That is the question. And there's an awful lot of thinking on this matter, and I don't know the answer. And I have theories on it. I don't have a firm belief on it. there's certainly an awful lot of highly informed speculation that there are very dark reasons that they don't want because they're participating in it. And there have been technology transfers that are, consistent with what we know about spiritual forces, which is always a deal. Bow down before me and all of this will be yours. I mean, it's kind of the core story in the New Testament, and it's the template for our own lives. In fact, we face this all the time in our own lives. You don't need to be interested in UFOs to recognize that so many times you reach a juncture in your life, in my life, where it's like, I could do this and I would get a lot out of it. Become more powerful, get to have sex with someone I want to have sex with, become richer, if only I violate what I believe, if only I bow down and worship you. And there's a lot of informed speculation that the US government has participated in this, and the defense technology, in particular nuclear technology, is the product of that. And I don't know if that's true. I will say one extremely interesting thing that no one seems to know is that it's not exactly clear where nuclear technology came from.
But who would we be cutting a deal with in this scenario?
So that's why I don't speculate about it, because I don't know the answer. Obviously, what we're seeing, these phenomena are spiritual phenomena. And one of the reasons that I came to that conclusion was because of an incredibly kooky story that's not kooky at all. It's 100% real, which is cattle mutilations. And cattle mutilations are a consistent feature of life in the West, not just in the United States, but going back hundreds of years in Europe. Farmers would find their cattle, their sheep, slain and dismembered in a way that no butcher could replicate and drained of all of their blood. And clearly this is a ritual sacrifice of an animal, which is described in not just the Old Testament, but many sacred texts and many religions. And it was the basis, of course, of all of the ancient human sacrifice cults, which were like in every country, not just in Latin America, but my ancestors, the Norse sacrifice people. So like sacrificing people or animals to please the gods is the one consistent feature of all religion going back to the beginning of recorded history.
Okay. That was Mr. Tucker Carlson. I found his remarks truthful. And these are the Tucker Carlson truths, if you will. This is an outline of what he said, or what he claimed, or the beliefs he articulated about the UFO phenomenon in this clip. One, he said, beyond question, physics-defying non-state UAP are real. Okay, I don't think anyone of us will argue that point. He, like the Washington Post, like so much of the world now is saying that it's taken for granted that these anomalous advanced craft are real. Okay, no head scratcher there. Two, this is where it gets controversial. Tucker Carlson says that these UAP are real, but they are spiritual phenomena, not extraterrestrials. Spiritual phenomena, angels and demons, of course, that have been here on earth forever. Now, that's the controversial claim that we are going to look at in great detail tonight, because I go in detail on it in book 2 of Chariots of the Black Gods, Battle in the Sky, UFOs and the War of Armageddon. As we unpack these Tucker Carlson truths of UFOs, I want you to have this book in mind, and in particular the subtitle, Battle in the Sky, UFOs and the War of Armageddon, because This is the operative context to what you are hearing from Tucker Carlson and so many others. We're going to look at that. So Tucker Carlson says these are spiritual phenomena, angels and demons. He is not wrong, beloveds. 3, he says the extraterrestrial hypothesis is the fruit of a concerted, decades-long disinformation campaign by the U.S. government. That is precisely what I documented first in the first edition of our book, published in 2024. That's the alien hoax, in which I detail in even greater fashion in the new edition of the book, Book 1. The U.S. government has deliberately fabricated and pushed an extraterrestrial hypothesis of the UFO phenomenon, pushed it for decades as a disinformation campaign. He says, Tucker Carlson, the government flooded the zone with lies, created fake stories and conspiracy theories in order to confuse the issue and, quote, lead people in the wrong direction. That is absolutely true. And I document that in great detail in our book, first in 2024, and even more so now in the 2026 edition of the book. So far, no lies told by Tucker Carlson. Yes, we're going to dive deep onto point number 2 because that's the source of so much controversy among those who have heard Tucker Carlson. But we'll come back to that. Look at what Tucker Carlson said. Number 5. He said, the way to know what the truth is by figuring out what they're trying to prevent you from believing. They meaning the government. So if you want to know what the real truth is, figure out what the government is trying to keep away from you and me. What they're trying to keep away from you and me are not aliens. They are pushing aliens. What they are trying to keep away from you and me is the Black Muslim crypto civilization that is at the root of the UFO phenomenon. Now look, Tucker Carlson, when he says the U.S. government flooded the zone with lies and created fake stories and conspiracy theories in order to confuse the issue and lead people in the wrong direction, he is only re-articulating a profound truth that ufologist Jacques Vallée articulated years ago. He told us, he said, in describing the state of ufology at the time and looking at all of the alien narratives and conspiracy theories that flooded the zone of ufology. Years ago, Jacques Vallée articulated the principle that's underneath what we're witnessing. He said, quote, if you cannot force a train to slow down, there is another way of stopping it. You can speed up the locomotive until it goes crazy and jumps the track. That has been the play of the U.S. government. they tried to tell the public UFOs don't exist. But too many smart, well-placed people saw and encountered them and said they exist. So the government's claim of swamp gas was just not believable. So the government took another track. It couldn't stop this UFO is real train, couldn't slow it down. So the government sped it up and made it jump track. It sped it up by making it more crazy, more outlandish, and made the UFO narrative so extra it jumped the track of rationality. And so the most classic, the pillars of the UFO narrative is now very nonsensical. The zone has been flooded, as Tucker Carlson said, and he is right. Tucker Carlson said America's nuclear arms are the fruit of a technology transfer from UAP to the US. In volume 2 of Chariots of the Black Gods, I detail that in fact there's truth to that. Maybe not in the precise way that Tucker Carlson puts it here, that a deal was struck, that the gods of the UAP required worship from US government people and they will share technology. No, it didn't go quite like that. But we document that. The origin of the US atomic program began with Allah gifting a so-called UFO or baby plane first to Italy. America, the US got a hold of that baby plane, studied it, and that's how the Manhattan Project was successful. The project to produce America's atomic bomb, it began with Allah gifting the West a piece of divine technology to study. So that can be classed as technology transfer. Seven, Tucker Carlson says he sees cattle mutilations as ritual sacrifices of an animal that is indicative of the spiritual nature of the UFO phenomenon. Now, that point doesn't necessarily resonate with me, but I understand where he's coming from, even if I don't share that interpretation of cattle mutilations. We can't fault him for considering, for example, in the Hebrew Bible, in the temple cult of Jerusalem, it was quite bloody, or there was a staple of the temple cult, not just of Jerusalem, but of temple religions of the ancient world. A staple of it was ritual animal sacrifice. Tucker Carlson sees cattle mutilations along those same lines. I don't necessarily buy into that, but I'm not offended by that. So understand that on the most controversial point, the spiritual entities behind, the spiritual entities behind the UFO phenomenon. Let me see. Do it like this. Give me a second, family. How's that? Okay. The spiritual interpretation of the UFO phenomenon is not unique to Tucker Carlson. That was not a specifically Tucker Carlson truth. Not only did Marjorie Taylor Greene articulate it, but Vice President J.D. Vance has on several occasions said the exact same thing, that behind UFOs are spiritual forces. He said, if another person sees an alien, maybe I see an angel or a demon. Where does this spiritual interpretation of the UFO phenomenon come from? And Brother Wesley, why do you insist that it's true? Are you saying, Brother Wesley, that you agree that it's demons flying the mother wheel? Of course not. I am saying, and I showed that when those who claim that it's demons flying the UFOs, I can show that by demons, they specifically mean black gods. And demons is a white Christian interpretation of a divine black reality that the white Christians find threatening. This is why they use the language demon, because it's a black force that they know, a powerful force, a sacred force, but a hostile force, a force hostile to Christian America. And for that reason, you more often hear UFOs associated with demons than angels in this particular discourse. Can you prove that, Brother Dr. Wesley? I wouldn't have said it if I couldn't. And we do so in Volume 2 of Chariots of the Black Gods. Can you give us some of that proof tonight? And then we'll land the plane. The whole demonological interpretation, the whole spiritual interpretation of UFOs that you hear today for Tucker Carlson, from Vice President Vance, from Marjorie Taylor Jones, and so many others, this whole spiritual interpretation, demonology interpretation of the UFO phenomenon goes back to a very important group. A very important ultra secret circle of American government, military, and intelligence personnel. An ultra secret group that was brought together in 1952 with the express purpose of not finding out if UFOs are real. They knew UFOs were real. They came face to face with that reality in Roswell in 1947. They came face to face with the pilots of UFOs in Roswell in 1947. This particular circle of investigators was tasked with finding out what is the nature of this intelligence behind UFOs. What is the nature of the beings that are piloting these craft? This circle of ultra secret investigators, its official name is not known. It allowed itself to colloquially, euphemistically, be identified simply as the Collins Elite. And beginning in 1952 and financed through the CIA's Directorate of Plans, this group engaged in a classified investigation at the deepest level to find out the true nature of the beings themselves, not the craft. They weren't studying the craft. Others coming out or based at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was doing that. This group was tasked with producing an understanding of the beings themselves, the bodies of which was there at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, which is where this particular investigative body started out. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Give me 1 second, family. There we go. This is what we document in Book 2, Battle in the Sky, UFOs and the War of Armageddon. after decades of investigation based on classified data, the investigators that made up the Collins elite came to the startling conclusion that UAP are not extraterrestrial, but that UAP represent, or the entities behind UAP represent non-human intelligence or a non-human entity. When you hear the language today from Lou Elizondo and others, this is ufology, even government ufology in particular, officially never uses the language alien, and doesn't use the language extraterrestrial. There we go. Government ufology uses the language non-human intelligence. Non-human entities. And by non-human, this language originated with this group of investigators, the so-called Collins elite. And by non-human, they absolutely did not and do not mean extraterrestrial or alien. They mean non-human, not in a biological sense, but in a theological sense. By non-human, they mean spiritual intelligence. God, angels, demons are a non-human spiritual category. And the Collins elite, after decades of classified, ultra secret classified investigation, became convinced that these intelligences were non-human in the theological sense. Now, they would decide ultimately that the best description of these non-human intelligences, these spiritual entities behind the UFO phenomenon, they reached the conclusion that the best description of them is demon. What do they mean by demon? We know for a fact that the demons that they are referencing are black gods. Understand that the majority of the investigators that made up or that make up the Collins elite, they are intelligence officers, government personnel, but they are also Christian nationalists. So they view the world through a Christian theological lens that they inherited from European Christianity. And blackness in European Christianity was demonized. The devil, Satan himself, was called the black man. So blackness is routinely demonized in European Christianity. This is the case with those Christians that make up Collins' elite investigators. How do we know this? We know that the demons that the Collins elite spoke of were the black pilots of the UFO that they had real good knowledge of. We know that they understood and they knew that these beings are black gods, not demons. They knew that. They knew they were dealing with black beings, black gods. They labeled them demons because they also knew that these black gods were hostile to the United States of America. War of Armageddon is imminent, is what they understood. We know that the Collins elite, in their investigation, they relied heavily on this gentleman right here, Captain Andrija Puharich, a very important figure. He is at the root of the Collins elite's understanding of the UFO phenomena. Captain Andrija Puharich and the work he did in the 50s and 70s at the Warrenton Estate, this estate in Glen Cove, Maine. So important. Captain Andrija Puharich, his investigation and the contact he made with, reportedly, the beings of the UFO phenomenon and the scientific conclusions that he came to became the foundation of the Collins elite's conclusions and interpretation of the UFO phenomenon. And Captain Andrija Puharich was very explicit. The beings of the UFO phenomenon are ancient African gods, not demons. He never identified them as demons. He specifically identified them after extensive investigation, scientific work, and even successful contact. Captain Puharich affirmed that the intelligences behind the UFO phenomenon are ancient African gods. The details of his 20-year investigation this is a summary of Captain Puharich's conclusions that's foundational to the Collins elite conclusion, which is the official government posture, but it has been the most secret position of the U.S. government. And what you hear in the public square today by people like Lou Elizondo is not the truth of this position. It's a caricature of it, because this is what Captain Puharich found after 20 years of classified investigation. He concluded that the beings behind UFO phenomena, one, are a group of divine beings who collectively are God. Puharich said that these beings identify themselves, it's a group, a council, and they identify themselves collectively as God. Two, Puharich found that these beings are ancient gods of Africa. Further, three, Puharich concluded that these beings, these ancient gods of Africa, are also identical with the God of the Hebrew Bible, Elohim, which means gods. Puharich's investigation determined that the language of these gods is an ancient biliteral form of Hebrew that has now disappeared. And why this is so important, all who have read my books on Black Arabia, I document that ancient Hebrew is Arabic. And in particular, in this book right here, you can get this book on the website as well, drwesley.info. This book, Origins of the Religion of Islam, Mecca and the Ancient Cult of the Black God. I document that the oldest layers of the Hebrew language is Arabic. So this now lost ancient Hebrew spoken by these gods that Puharich studied for 20 years, these gods behind the UFO phenomena, the ancient now lost Hebrew that they spoke was a Arabic Hebrew. Number 5, Puharich said it is these gods with their Arabic Hebrew, if you will, that are behind the UFO phenomena. Puharich said that documented or reported that the main craft, listen to this, the main craft of these gods is a, quote, city-sized craft that hovers above the earth, in which these gods use as a planet. This is what Puharich reported. Now, of course, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said before Puharich ever, his reports ever hit the public, which did so for the first time, they leaked out in 1974. But before that, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that the mother wheel is a city in the sky, and that the gods used the mother wheel as a human-built planet. Exactly the conclusions of Captain and Dr. Puharich. Captain, this is important. 7. Puharich says that in appearance, these beings, these ancient African gods, these gods of the Hebrew Bible that are behind the UFO phenomenon, that in appearance, these beings are ancient looking men. Men. Puharich says these ancient African gods of the UFOs are the source of poltergeist phenomenon. Y'all seen the movie Poltergeist? See, Hollywood wants us to believe that poltergeist phenomenon derives from the evil dead. No. I document that true poltergeist phenomenon is really the psychological warfare of the gods against the enemy. True poltergeist phenomenon doesn't derive from dead people. It derives from living gods. It's psychological warfare by the gods on their enemy in this developing war of Armageddon. Captain Puharich concluded that these beings, these ancient African gods, these gods of the Hebrew Bible, have an unmatched psionic power, psionic, the power of the mind. He determined that these beings have an unmatched psionic power. He said with their mind power, they have total command of all material and energy systems. It's this psionic power of the gods that's at the root of so-called poltergeist phenomena, which is, again, the gods engaging in psychological warfare against the enemy, poltergeist as a divine psyop. True on that. So, the primary investigator that the Collins elite relied upon, whose conclusions are the foundation of their conclusions, did not say these beings are demons. He said they are gods, ancient African gods, the gods of Egypt, the Enad of Egypt, the so-called Assyrian gods of Egypt, as an example, with its black god Osiris. This is what is meant by non-human specimens. They aren't non-human in the biological sense. They're non-human in the theological sense. But the government allows us to think, when we hear non-human, that they're talking about Skinny Bob or gray aliens. Non-human in an extraterrestrial biological sense. No, that is not what non-human means in this context. They mean non-human in a theological sense. The black gods is human versus divine. These entities, as Captain Puharich discovered, these entities are divine. These entities are gods. These entities are black gods. So UFOs are not alien spaceships. UFOs are chariots of the black gods. Puharich's data was received by the Collins elite and filtered through their American Christian evangelical lens. And so these black gods that are hostile to the U.S. can only be, in their reckoning, can only be demons. And this is why you hear such talk of demons. They know they are black gods, but who are hostile, who are a threat to the U.S. And so they called them demons. So I'm going to close like this. This is how I close in volume 2. Listen to what we say. The convergence between the conclusions of America's ultra-secret UFO investigation, the Collins Elite, and the revelations of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is striking. The conclusions, Captain Puharich's conclusions, mirror the revelations of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The conclusions between the two emerge from radically different epistemic and theological premises. Black Muslim theology and U.S. national security ufology share neither metaphysical commitments nor political objectives. Yet, both frameworks converge on a strikingly similar conclusion. The intelligence behind the UFO phenomena is not visitors from distant star systems, but are terrestrially embedded spiritual beings historically interpreted as gods, angels, and demons. The disagreement between U.S. ufology and the revelations of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the difference between these two, the disagreement between them lies not in ontology or even in the behaviors attributed to these beings. Rather, the interpretation or the disagreement is in moral interpretation of these beings. From the standpoint of national security ufology and from the standpoint of Christian theology, the entities associated with UFOs represent an existential threat. Their superior aerial technology, their psionic capabilities, and their capacity to intervene in human affairs are interpreted as hostile and destabilizing. Within this worldview, hostile spiritual intelligences operating through advanced aerial craft are necessarily categorized as demonic. The threat they pose is not merely physical, but metaphysical, implicating human sovereignty, theological order, and the stability of Western civilization itself. The Nation of Islam describes an almost identical phenomenology while arriving at an inverse ethical judgment. What the national security state and Christian theology condemn as demonic hostility, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad reveals to be divine judgment. These beings are not invaders from space. They are enforcers of moral law, acting under divine mandate rather than in rebellion against it. Demons are angels in rebellion against God, but these entities are carrying out God's mandate in his judgment against America. For Christian intelligence officials within the Collins elite, hostile angels are, by definition, demons. For the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the same hostile forces are righteous agents of divine justice whose hostility is directed toward oppression, corruption, and moral decay. What one system interprets as malevolent intrusion, the other recognizes as deserved judgment. The Collins elite describe hostile angels operating through UFOs and threatening America. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad describes angels operating through baby planes and sent to execute correction upon a corrupt and unjust civilization, in particular, the United States. The descriptions of Collins elite and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad align remarkably. Only the theological and ethical interpretation diverges. This is strong proof that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has been telling the truth of the matter this whole time. This is a strong argument. Why? It is the Nation of Islam that's on the front line in the understanding of this phenomenon. The popular narrative around UFOs is not the true narrative. The narrative that the government is openly pushing is not the true narrative. This that I just described is the true thinking of the U.S. national security state regarding the UFO phenomenon, and the true thinking of the U.S. national security state mirrors the revelation of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad on this matter. So I'm going to end here. Let me see if there are some questions I can Did Puharich speak with the black pilots of the craft? Have a whole chapter on that very point. Not just Puharich, But to ask members of the Ford family, the DuPont family, the Astor family, the ruling elite with Puharich made contact with these black gods. And if you get the book, you will see detail the nature of this contact between Puharich and his round table, between the Astor family, the DuPont family, the Ford family, the very families that Master Fard Muhammad said he saw a vision when he was 6 of pushing the Fords, the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, and the Astor family, pushing them in a lake of fire. And in 1952, members of the Astor family, the DuPont family, and the Ford's family, I can't confirm Rockefeller, but those 3 families with Puharich made contact with the black gods. We detailed that in our most recent edition of the book. T. Pharaoh, like Shalom. Say, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Wesley. Have any members of the NOI research team been invited to discuss this phenomenon at any of the global sessions that discuss this? Not to my knowledge, dear family. I cannot, with conviction, speak for Brother Eliah Rashad, another one of our great scholars on the subject, but I believe he would answer the same. As far as I know, no. And of course, I think the reason is very obvious. Both the government and ufology have converged. They have the same narrative now because the intent is to bury the last best kept secret of ufology. Excuse me. The black pilots of these crafts. See, this black Muslim crypto civilization, that is the most destabilizing truth of the whole UFO phenomenon. They give us an extraterrestrial narrative as a buffer, as a distraction, because a black Muslim crypto civilization narrative is utterly destabilizing to pretty much all of the pillars of Western civilization. Everything crumbles if the truth of the black Muslim crypto civilization behind this phenomenon, if it ever got out on a mainstream level. So both ufology and the U.S. government have a vested interest in making sure that truth is beat back. So in that context, I do not necessarily expect an invitation from the orgs of ufology, but we are all willing to engage ufology and the ufologists on this subject. Did the U.S. propaganda machine try to discredit Puharich and his findings? Absolutely. It's very complicated. let me. I love these questions. I'm going to do more Q&A. It's very, very interesting. Let me back up a bit so I can paint the picture real clear. I mentioned Puharich with the DuPonts, the Force as stores. What we're talking about is Puharich founded what's called the Round Table Foundation. The Round Table Foundation consisted, based in Glen Cove, Maine, consisted of him as the founder and leader, but also of the DuPonts, the store, the Forbes family members. Aldous Huxley, the British author, was a member of the Round Table. Vice President Henry Wallace was a visitor and a patron of the Round Table. It's the Round Table under Puharich's leadership that during its investigation made contact with these entities reportedly, but the Round Table was a public asset of the Pentagon. Puharich was a deep national security state operative. He worked for the Office of Naval Intelligence. He worked for the CIA. His investigation wasn't private. His effort to crack the secret of the entities behind the UFO phenomenon, it was paid for by the Pentagon. He was doing their work because the Collins elite personnel were embedded in the Pentagon and intelligence agencies. So his Round Table, his investigations that made contact reportedly with these beings and reached the conclusions that we put on the board, it was done under the auspices of the national security state. A conflict developed. Puharich actually became not just a believer in the reality of these beings, but he became a follower of theirs. To the day he died, he was obsessed with these beings. And the time came where they cut him off and he went left. He could not, being cut off from these higher intelligences, sent him into a tailspin. Now, while he had not just a positive view, because for him, they are the gods of the Bible, he had a positive view of them. But as his data was sent to and filtered by his paymasters, the Collins elite in particular, and they had an opposite view of these beings, the Round Table and the Collins elite had conflicting postures toward these beings. And the conflict in how to understand and how to relate to these beings became a problem for Puharich himself. So in the 70s, after he built the foundation, laid the foundation for Collins elite conclusions of the phenomenon. In the 70s, he had a number of run-ins with the CIA. According to him, they tried 3 times to assassinate him. But of course, if they wanted to assassinate him, they could do so successfully. What we're looking at were 3 attempts to frighten him, to get him to course correct. Now, his work was hijacked by the same people who had a different evaluation of these powers than he did. They hijacked his narrative in the 70s, and much of his work was used to peddle a fabricated narrative called Lab 9. When you research Puharich and you come across Lab 9, this was the hijacked version of his material, hijacked by the US government. So absolutely, there's an ongoing conflict that developed between Puharich and his original sponsors because they evaluated the data differently. They evaluated the beings differently. Puharich was a convert of the beings, and that caused some great conflict with his sponsors and paymasters, and ultimately he died under mysterious circumstances. Okay. So Brother Malcolm says, Dr. Wesley, by your being trained in biblical Hebrew, what was your reaction learning that the black gods are using a lost biliteral form of Hebrew? My reaction is that we know the gods speak Arabic because that lost biliteral form of Hebrew is in actuality an ancient form of Arabic, which I document in this book, Origins of the Religion of Islam. And of course, so learning from Dr. and Captain Puharich that his investigation concluded that the language of these beings was this ancient biliteral form of Hebrew, which I know to be Arabic. That's just further proof of the Muslim context of these beings, thus Black Muslim crypto civilization. So I wasn't surprised, but I was, as I always am, pleasantly, I was pleased to come across his data, which is just further confirmation of the revelation of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So we're gonna you mentioned projects that you are working on. Will those projects be made for public consumption? And if so, can you provide a sneak peek? They will be released to the public. They are for public analysis. I won't do a sneak peek just yet. So I'm going to end there. Thank you, dear family, for tuning in, for giving your brother. I spent way more time than I intended to. I did not intend for you to keep you this long, family. Thank you for staying with your brother. I will ask that you avail yourself to the work, the latest editions of Chariots of the Black Gods. Book 1, Ufologies, Best Kept Secret, The Black Pilots, and book 2, Battle in the Sky, UFOs and the War of Armageddon. Those books and others are available at our website, www.drwesley.info, Dr. Wesley, WESLEY.info, INFO. Inshallah, we will continue this conversation in the near future. Thank you, family, for giving me of your valuable time. May Allah bless all of you. Assalamu alaikum.